EVO. The rite of exorcism begins with an invitation. Do you renounce Satan and all his works? In theory, the subject is expected to answer. In practice, they rarely do. Or rather, they answer, just not with their own voice. The first and only recorded exorcism at San Miguel Seminary took place on the evening of December 14th, 2017. It was not authorized by Rome. It wasn't even authorized by the Archdiocese. In fact, it was never supposed to happen at all. But the man who performed it didn't ask for permission. He asked for silence. His name was Father Ignacio Suarez, a Jesuit stationed in Bogota, mid-50s, trim, unimpressive on paper. He wasn't a trained exorcist in the formal sense. Rome actually has a program for that. But Ignacio had, according to whispered reputation, been called in on more than a dozen occasions to consult on irregular spiritual matters. He was never photographed, rarely cited, and didn't believe in prolonged ritual. If it's real, he once told a student, you'll know before the candle goes out. Welcome back to The Devil Within. This is part 2 of the Caracas Seminary possession. At the request of a bishop whose name has never been revealed, Ignacio arrived at San Miguel alone. And he didn't stay on campus. He refused the rector's guest room and instead slept in the sacristy. His only request was that no one enter the chapel between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The week leading up to the exorcism was, by most accounts, uneventful, quiet, suspiciously so. Even the faculty remarked on the stillness. The dogs stopped barking. The bells hung heavy in the air. One seminarian later described it as the calm before something terrible remembers your name. And then came the night. We know what happened, or what was supposed to happen, thanks to an audio recording. Not an official one. Not planned. A student named Mateo had left his phone in the pew hours earlier while studying for an exam. A student named Mateo had left his phone in the pew hours earlier while studying for an exam. The battery was low, but it survived long enough to capture roughly 12 minutes of audio. No visuals, no context, just 12 minutes of silence and then a voice. Well, 2 voices actually. Father Ignacio's is calm, unshaken, and he begins with the Roman ritual. I exorcise you, O unclean spirit, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Depart and leave this creature of God. And the second voice is wrong. Not in pitch, not even in language, but in timing. It answers before he speaks. It mimics him, mocks him, repeating the invocation as if it's feeding it back through some invisible delay. The words blur. They become distorted. At minute 4, you hear the unmistakable clatter of a pew being tipped over. At minute 5, Ignacio's voice falters, not with fear, but with recognition. He says one word. Tomas! And then silence. At minute 7, the microphone picks up something really strange. Not a growl, not a scream, but it something wet, like breathing through blood. And then the sound of 3 knocks. Deliberate, evenly spaced. 3 knocks repeated 4 times. The same pattern described by the janitor. The same knocks reportedly heard by seminarians in the hallway near the vanished stairwell. At minute 12, you actually hear the candle blow out, and then nothing. When the sacristan unlocked the chapel at 6:30 a.m., he found the altar candles not only still intact, but unlit, and the pews were orderly, not disturbed at all. The sanctuary was clean. But Father Ignacio was gone. No note, no luggage, no sign of departure. His name was never mentioned again by the archdiocese. His personnel file, when requested by journalists in 2019, was listed as inaccessible due to clerical reorganization. The only trace of his presence was found in the chapel registry. One line, handwritten in Latin. Non venit solvere, sed ligare. He did not come to free, he came to bind. And what of Tomas? A month later, an elderly Benedictine monk at a monastery high in the Andes died during morning prayer. His caretakers described him as mute, obedient, and always watching. His true identity was never confirmed, but on his bedside table, beneath a cracked, leather-bound Bible, was found a folded piece of paper. On it, a childlike drawing of a seminary chapel, and underneath, written in block letters, the following sentence: "The door is open." The decision to shut down the seminary was made on a Monday, not publicly, of course. That announcement wouldn't come for another 6 weeks, and it would be wrapped in language like restructuring, integration with regional programs, and a prayerful discernment of San Miguel's evolving mission. But inside the chancery, the conversation lasted 14 minutes. No vote, no debate, just a firm declaration from the Archbishop. We do not keep soil that won't hold a blessing. The buildings would remain, the land would revert to the Archdiocese, but the seminary, the community, the formation program, the liturgical rhythm, all that was finished, quietly euthanized. And like any good burial, it came with one final rite, a farewell Mass. That Mass took place on January 13th, 2018. It was a Saturday. Midnight. Technically, midnight Masses aren't standard practice outside of Christmas Eve or an Easter Vigil. But the faculty insisted. They said it would be fitting, that the students needed closure, that the darkness, literal and spiritual, just might be softened by sacrament. The bishop didn't attend. Only 9 seminarians remained, down from 32 the year before. Each was instructed to bring a candle, and each was told to wear black. Not their vestments, not their cassocks, just black clothing. A Jesuit priest named Father Andres, brought in last minute to replace the vanished Ignacio, led the Mass. The chapel was lit only by candles and silence. No music, no homily, just scripture and sacrament. And someone else. Now, there's no official record of a visitor that night. There's no logbook entry. There's no signature in the guest registry, but every remaining student recalls seeing him. A man in the back pew. Not seated. Standing. Wearing a dark suit. No collar, no cross. Thin, expressionless, and not blinking. Not once. He arrived just after the opening prayer and left during the final blessing. And in between, during the elevation of the host, when Father Andres lifted the Eucharist and spoke the words, "This is my body," the man in the suit said, audibly, "No, it was mine." He wasn't removed. No one confronted him. In fact, when questioned later, even the celebrant claimed he hadn't heard it. Only those holding the candles. After communion, the flames dimmed. Several students reported a sudden drop in temperature. One said the wax began to melt upwards. Father Andres completed the Mass. He dismissed the congregation. The candles were extinguished. The chapel was locked. But someone forgot the sacristy. The next morning, the linen drawer was open, and inside were 9 folded altar cloths, each bearing a single burned fingerprint in the center. No fingerprints were ever matched. No explanation was ever given. The seminary was officially closed the following month. As for the man in the suit, he was never seen again. But in the weeks that followed, a letter arrived at the Archdiocese, postmarked from Lisbon. No return address, no greeting, just a single line written in clean block script. Your reckoning has not begun. It has resumed. And beneath it was a Polaroid photo, the interior of the chapel, taken at midnight. Every pew is empty except the front row, where 9 black-robed figures sit facing forward, heads bowed, candles in hand. And behind them, barely visible in the shadows of the choir loft, stands a 10th man, not facing the altar, facing the camera. It took 3 months to tear down the seminary, not because of its size. San Miguel was actually pretty modest compared to other Latin American institutions. But there were delays. Contractors backing out, permits mysteriously revoked, equipment failures. And at one point, a demolition crew refused to return after a worker found a crucifix blackened and bent beneath a collapsed section of the east wall. Like it had been struck by lightning, he said. But there wasn't a storm. Eventually, the archdiocese brought in an out-of-town firm from Argentina. No questions, no parish discounts, no communion perks. Just a deadline and a flat fee. They started with the dormitories, then the classrooms, then the chapel. And that's where everything changed. Beneath the chapel, there was supposed to be nothing. The original blueprint showed a shallow crawl space, just enough to access plumbing and electric. But when the foundation was breached, the backhoe punched through into open air. A chamber, roughly 30 feet across, circular, carved directly into the bedrock. Not man-made in the modern sense. There were no concrete supports, no ventilation, just stone and symbols carved into the walls. Some were recognizable: inverted crosses, Latin anagrams, Benedictine seals twisted backwards. But some were not. A priest from the archdiocese was called in to bless the site. He took one look around, muttered a prayer in Spanish, and left without explanation, and then resigned from the priesthood 3 weeks later. Inside the chamber, investigators found 5 objects: a child's shoe, scuffed, size 3, a bronze censer scorched on the inside, a framed photo of Pope Paul VI with the eyes scratched out, a broken mirror wrapped in linen, and a wooden door. Not standing, not even whole, just a single slab, rotted, warped, painted red on one side, but unmistakably a door, and carved on its surface the words ab imis, Latin for from the depths. This newly found chamber, sealed, not bulldozed, not even excavated, just, again, filled with concrete. It was blessed in 3 languages and then covered with gravel. The official archdiocese press release called it an unplanned structural anomaly, with no further comment. But one worker took a photo before the concrete was poured. He posted it on a forum for urban explorers. Yes, it was quickly deleted, but not before it was archived. In the photo, the 5 objects sit in a ring. The door lies flat, and behind it on the far wall, there's a small recess, like a niche for a statue. But it's empty. Almost. You can zoom in, and if you do, you could see something just barely visible at the back. It's a handprint, small, child-sized, and burned into the stone. The site was converted into a community garden, with tomatoes and basil, rosemary, and it's all flourishing. No one speaks of the seminary. There's no plaque that marks the spot. But some evenings, when the soil is turned, a faint metallic smell drifts into the air, like rust or blood. And what of the survivors? Of the 9 seminarians who attended that midnight mass, 4 left the priesthood. 2 joined silent orders. 1 actually vanished during mission work in the Amazon. 1 now lives under an assumed name in Spain, and 1, only 1, ever spoke publicly. In a 2023 interview with the Catholic Fringe blog, he was asked what he believed had happened at San Miguel. He paused, and then he said, "There are places God abandoned before we arrived. We didn't open that door. We just found it cracked." Thank you for joining me on The Devil Within. This has been the Caracas Seminary Possession. If you like the show, please share it with your friend. Make sure you're following us on Apple and Spotify and YouTube, where you can now see these videos. If you have a question, if you have a theory, if you have your own story, email me at info@evocreative.com. I'd love to hear from you. The Devil Within is an EVO production recorded here live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm Brandon Morgan, your writer and host. Until next time, stay safe out there.